Good morning, everyone that I already know. This is pretty straightforward. I set out to help redesign the Visitor Center at the Gordon B. Hinckley Alumni Building. The Visitor Center, well, I've got a slide that kind of sums it up in one word. And actually, the man who gave this quote is sitting in the room with us. My father, 4 years ago, when he came to the Hinckley Center, he said, as he was using the kiosks, "This feels old." At that point, the content was only 4 years old, and now it's 8 years old, and still nothing had changed as of a month ago, really. So the problems that we faced were that the design of the kiosks was, well, aged. Technology was failing. We had serious overheating problems. The implementation that we had relied on dirty data checks in the database every 100 milliseconds, which meant that any lagging connectivity suddenly broke everything. My remote does not want to work more than 5 feet away from my computer, so I'm going to stand back here, I guess. It was difficult to adapt. As you can kind of see in that screenshot there, we had very limited real estate based on the design that had been approved 8 years ago. So adding more than 3 buttons across the bottom of that particular screen just wasn't going to happen. There's a few other screenshots of what it looked like. This is a really good example of the problem we ran into is, there was literally no other way to add something, add any content. We couldn't blur out some photo and add more menus. It was full. We were out of space. Same story over here. We could have added one more button and that would have been it. And every time we wanted to change something, it meant re-rendering all 3 states of the button, the hover state, the click state, and the resting state like that. And then exporting them and hoping that they were pixel perfect exactly the same size as the last time, or else the layout broke. It was very, very picky. Then we had problems with these sort of slides, text information slides, because when you wanted to change something, it wasn't like you went into a database or a content management system to change it. What you actually got to do was open it in Adobe Illustrator and type the text, and as soon as you ran out of space, you had to start deleting other text. It was just not flexible at all. And then that required a re-export. And you had to make sure you had the right fonts installed. And it was just an absolute nightmare to update and change anything. So as a result, we had mostly the same content we had when we moved into the building 8 years ago, because no one wanted to touch it. One of our writers is actually here, and she would send us new things, and we'd be like, sorry, this is an actual nightmare. We don't want to deal with that right now. And so our objective, my objective in doing this was, first of all, to enhance the guest experience and the exposure of the university to those who are coming here for the first time, or who are repeat visitors who want to show off their alma mater to their children, to their friends, their colleagues. And as it stood, our visitor center was not a good representation of us as a university. It was a good representation of us 8 years ago, but nothing was current. And we wanted to have some sort of feedback on what things people were clicking on. We had no idea if the content we had was actually worthwhile, if it was something people wanted to see. So the goal then became to create a modern, easily updated kiosk system built on modern web standards that could also facilitate reporting and metrics on usage. One that was robust, that didn't require dirty data checks against a database every 100 milliseconds, something that would reset itself periodically to make sure everything was clear and clean, and something that allowed people to make changes. That was a really big focus for us. We wanted to utilize the existing Hinckley Center design practices for easy maintainability. We have a workflow at the Hinckley Center in the technology department. We have technologies we're used to, we're trained in. And initially I had set out to change kind of all of that, to use different technology than we were used to. And as I examined it, it made more sense to actually build something that everyone else could also maintain, that they could open up and say, oh yeah, this looks like our other system here. So that was a changing objective. So with that said, I want to take a minute and show you kind of what we've come up with. We have a couple types of kiosks in the Hinckley Center. We have a single screen kiosk that shows textual information, graphs, charts, and we also have dual screen kiosks, which I've set up here so I can demonstrate that as well. Something that we found in our research was that places like Visitor Center on Temple Square use what they call attraction loops to draw people in to the content on the kiosk. Right now, the content that you see is the main menu, the screenshots that I showed you before. It's a static image, it's not engaging. A lot of the titles just really don't make you go, oh, I want to click that. It's more like, wow, this is boring. So we wanted to change that. And so we've done that. We've created attraction loops, and it's still in process. The content is still rolling out. But this is one attraction loop we've created for this particular kiosk that we're looking at. Then as soon as a person walks up and taps the screen, they get brought in to this menu. This menu is being built dynamically from the database. So making a change is as simple as changing, a single entry or deactivating certain content and activating other content. It makes it very fast to rotate through what we want to show. And same story here, when we click, and I'm sorry for the performance lag because it is a lot smoother on the actual hardware that it gets used on. We're able to change these images out. They pull just from the database. So you want to throw an image in, you just rename it in the database and you're good to go. Designed every type of screen that we would possibly need. So we've got a bio screen is what we call this. And we tell the database, this particular feature is a bio screen. So when you get clicked on, you need to build it as a bio screen. And as such, we have something that's consistent. The design is the same throughout the kiosk. It makes for a more uniform user experience. People know what to expect when they click on something. Once they've clicked on one type of thing, they have an idea of what the rest of them are going to look like. We did try to flatten the content as much as possible. So we wanted to only be 1 or 2 steps away from the main screen. And this is the only example where we had to even go 2 steps away from the main screen to get to these people. As you can see, the motion makes sense. You feel like you're transitioning clearly from one menu or one feature to the next. And we also have a graph screen. So something that we talked back and forth about a lot was how do we make a graph screen that we can update more easily than before, but that also looks better than a rendered on the fly graph. And so what we came up with was an agreement between us and the publications and graphics people that every year they will receive all the new statistics and send us the images. And instead of before having the whole page as an image with an image map, and that's what was so difficult, we just have to pop in this single PNG file into the database, same name, and the content's updated. So we thought that was a nice balance between updatability and kind of that professional polish that you can't really get super well with dynamic charting. Something else that we wanted to focus on was making sure that the kiosks were always in a ready state. So right now in the visitor center, if you click on something and walk away, that's the something that someone else gets to walk up to. And it's confusing. It's like, why am I on this screen? Unless you're the one who clicked it. And so what this actually does, and I probably don't have time to demonstrate it, maybe if I just keep waffling on a bit, but what this does is it has a timer and it watches for any sort of interaction with the display at all. And as soon as a minute's gone by without any interaction, it resets to the home page. And rather than just traversing through, I actually have it reload the page to make sure that any weird glitches that might be happening are always taken care of within a minute of someone walking away from the kiosk. That was really important as well, because we noticed that people will often abandon what they're doing because the tour guide comes in and grabs them and says, oh, come over here and look at this with me. And so by building in that sort of timer, that system to say, okay, no one's looking at me, I need to move on, we're able to take care of that pretty well. So I'm going to let that sit for another minute and talk a little bit more about content committee. At the beginning, this was a much smaller project than what it ended up being. The beginning was just an interface reskin. We weren't going to do anything other than take the same content and throw it in these nice little pretty bubbles and call it a day. But as we started to look at the user interface and talked about, oh, okay, we only want people to be 1 or 2 steps away from the content, we realized that wasn't really, oh, there it went. Yeah, I talked long enough. We realized that wasn't really feasible, that we needed to also address the content of the kiosk and determine what really needed to be shown. And so we've done that. We've changed, for example, the Luminary alumni, which is why I was on this slide. We had people that really had never been heard of. And so what we did is we took a step back and said, okay, who are people who are actually lights, you know, who went out and really put a face on the university. So we came up with these 6. And the nice thing is we did have more than 6 that we came back with. And the content committee now meets every 2 weeks. And so when it's time to change, if we look at our metrics and see, okay, this isn't being clicked on, we get to change it out just like that. It's really easy. So that's kind of a look at this single screen kiosk mentality. Wanted to take a look really fast, because this is something that I'm really proud of, actually, is the dual screen kiosks. As you can see here, we've got a TV up on the wall in the Hinckley Center, and then we have a smaller screen down at the bottom. The smaller screen just prompts you touch to begin, rather than having an attraction loop go on both. And in our actual implementation in the Hinckley Center, we have 2 separate Mac Minis, one that runs this display and one that runs this. So we had the problem of how do we control video? How do we move through things? Because right now, in the current implementation, when you click a video, you get exactly 2 controls: stop and pause. And it's not a good experience. So what we wanted to do was really add some flexibility for users. So when they come in and touch to begin, you notice the attraction loop keeps running. Until they give it a command that it needs to stop for, we keep the attraction loop going. So let's say we wanted to go into performing arts and take a look at Vocal Point. So it begins playback here. We actually have a scrubber, we have volume controls, and we have a volume range that we've determined they can go within. So we go from 0.25 to 1.0 of the volume. And we've actually leveled all the volumes on the content, which is a huge change as well. We can pause it, obviously, like before. We can also restart the video. We can scrub. Maybe if I can do it upside down. And we're actually scrubbing via WebSockets to the server and back, a live scrub, which is really quite cool. It's pretty cool to have 2 different browsers, 2 different computers talking to each other in that sort of real time. Same story here. I paused it. If I waited a minute, it would step me back and out of the content. Something I also failed to mention was that we've added text, I guess is the best way to say that, a description of what you're seeing. As I showed, you know, back here, when you click at a video, even on the dual screen setup, you got a black screen with 2 buttons. You know, this one's, I'm showing you a single screen so you can see the video playing. But point is, wasn't really, you didn't know what you were watching. You knew the title of what you were watching, but you didn't know anything else. This actually, you know, talks about, for example, Living Legends. It says, this is the group, here's a couple bullet points on what they've done. And so if you're wanting to show your kids something to keep them entertained while you're in the visitor center, show them. You can always come over here and read what you want to while your kids are watching the content. So that's it. That's the system, really.
You mentioned metrics.
Yes.
Are you going to talk more about that?
I can talk about that now instead, because my time is running out. So here we have kind of just like a dashboard. We decided we didn't want a CMS because every CMS we've ever seen creates kind of problems with the way that content is displayed. And where this is a very controlled environment for the content, we decided what we wanted to do was just allow a preview. So for example, let's go to that Living Legends one we just saw. So when you click Living Legends, you're going to see the content that's visible on the kiosk. You're also going to see a graph. Obviously, we have no data from February. We have data, though, from March and April about the number of clicks so far this month. We can export all of that. We can print the chart. I'm just using High Charts, which is a really nice JavaScript library. And then we want actual robust reporting. We come into the report section. and we can say, show me the content from the mind, body, spirit. That's this dual screen right here during the past day. You might find it hard to believe, but we have had over 200 clicks on the performing arts bubble on there. Part of that's our testing. Yeah, most of that's our testing. You can change the range. You can change the size. We can see it just by kiosk if we want. So we have a really good idea. And again, just like on the other screen, you can export all of these. And we thought it was important to make it so that the actual generation of the report read like a sentence. Display metrics from all kiosks during the past 16 months and group them by kiosk. So that the layman, I guess you can say, using this reporting, because that's something that the technologists aren't going to use. It's going to be the content committees looking at this. It's important for them to know exactly what report they're getting. So that's our simple little metrics, but it's actually, we think it's going to be pretty powerful to be able to say, okay, during the past month, which was our big high school tour month, what did everyone click on? Or, oh, it's been winter, it's been slow. What is everyone clicking on now? What are our current visitors wanting to see? So just to wrap it up, we talked a lot about the campus collaboration. We had a design committee, and that was originally all it was going to be. They create the attraction loops, select the images, design the interface. And then we had the content committee, which was created kind of on the fly. It's still a by the seat of our pants sort of thing, but we're figuring it out really fast. And it's been great to see people from communications, athletics, public affairs, alumni, all come together and discuss what we need to show as a university, what we need to do. So kind of in summary, new visitor center hardware. We spent about $30,000 upgrading all the hardware in the visitor center. We had new architecture, web-based reporting. It's all built on HTML5 and CSS3. And actually our backend, our web services are Cold Fusion, because Cold Fusion has WebSockets built in, which allows that cool scrubbing between two computers. And that's just kind of a visual overview of how it's built. That's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Could you maybe think about some of the lessons learned?
Sure.
Things
Yeah.
that you've done, and share a few of those with us?
So going back to the council thing, I think this degree has been about learning to marry technology and business, or the non-technologists, you could almost say. And it's been really, really good for me to sit on a content committee and a design committee and to be the one who's written all the code, because I've seen kind of this marriage take place. People who don't speak tech suddenly are getting more clued in about tech, what the limitations are. Right now they'll say, can we do this? I'm like, no, not really. I mean, we can, but not with the amount of time you're wanting to spend. Or they'll say, oh, I wish we could do this. And I get to pipe in and say, well, actually, we can do that. That's something pretty simple. And so it's been really enlightening to see that. Something else that's been good is the value of really good commenting. There's a lot of dynamic stuff that happens on these kiosks. We pull in different templates. We pull in, we do different AJAX calls depending on if it's a dual screen kiosk or a single screen kiosk. And there's a lot of dynamic stuff built in. And so it's been really important for me to read my own code, to comment it out. It's very readable, but it's a good reminder that, oh, this lives over here in this place, and this lives over here in this place. This is where everything is. Patience was another good lesson learned. I had a lot of this stuff developed way before the content was ready. And I think that speaks to how difficult selecting the right content is for this, and not being frustrated with that process. So, Charlene.
If we wanted to do something with the RISE initiative, it's such a big deal.
Yeah.
Our alumni, is it something that we take to the content committee first, or is it something that we take to someone like you?
Probably
Probably
here first. Yeah.
Something to see if it's even viable to add.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
we did, where would we add it?
Yeah. And that goes back to my previous point about, clarifying the limitations and the
As soon as
capabilities of
possible.
technologies. Yeah. And then determining, what
And
committee
what
gets
the content
formed.
would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Any other questions?
Is this being used now this way?
It's going to be rolled out today. It got finished last night at 10 o'clock. So. Not my part. My part was done. I just got to upload content that they sent me at 10:08. So.
No, this is actually quite brilliant, because I've worked with the old system and it was so awful.
Yeah. It really, there's no words to really describe how bad it was. So hopefully this is a lot easier.
Just one thought, it doesn't feel old now.
Oh, thank you for updating your quote.
Just so you know.
Yeah, we hope not. We had to keep traditional. Originally, we came with a modern design. I guess that was another lesson learned. We originally said, oh, we want this flashy, modern, grays and whites and blacks and just very, very kind of Apple or just modern feeling. And we got in that room and there's there's carpet from the Titanic on the floor in there. It's a heavy traditional room. And so we had to step back and say, how do we take, this modern circular modular design and make it feel like it's part of the space without working against it? And it took a couple weeks really to get something we liked. Took a parchment background really before which is what we had.
Well, along that line, who had input on that piece? On here's this older room, here's this new technology or the new field. How do you marry those things? Can you tell us about that just for a second?
Well, the design committee, that's why we decided we needed a committee rather than just me. I can design interfaces, but it really takes a lot of eyes to say, okay, this is not looking right. So when we made the committee, we went over publications and graphics, and they drew up this nice modern thing like they do, and we brought it back. They'd never been in the visitor center, so we from the Hinckley Center brought it back and just put the screenshots up on the kiosk displays and put the nice wood trim back around it and stood back and went, no, that's not right. So we called them and we said, come over here at some point this week and we'll put this screenshot up and you tell us if you feel like it's the right thing to do. And so they did, and their reaction was just like ours. It was a, nope, whoops, we didn't understand what we were working with. So they went back to the drawing board, and we had 2 more revisions before we got to where we're at. So, anything else?
Very good, Joshua.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Great job. All right, next up we have Scott Hutchins with Story Branches. We'll give you a few minutes to set up and a few minutes for Joshua to tear down. Thanks so much for being with us today.
See that one too. This is all our stuff.
Easy on me. Well, they know who you are. I didn't know you did this. Feel free to move whatever you need. Thanks. Doesn't fit. I thought it fit.
So Josh, when did you want to get serious about writing poetry?
Well, I don't know if I am still serious. I guess I mean, I was a web developer in high school, That was back when CSS was new and wonderful.
I meant on this project.
Oh, on this project, seriously about writing code. Oh, okay. This semester, it's just been probably February is when it got real. Once we had some semblance of design, so I kind of knew the structure I needed to approach it with. So yeah, that was February 20th, I believe, was when the design got finalized. So right around then.
For my sake, because I don't know, if they hired you as a.
Yeah, I worked there I've worked there for 4 years, actually. So that's why my dad said 4 years ago, this feels old. And I said, I know. And no one wanted to let me change it for a really long time. So this was a good impetus for a lot of groups. Okay. Get out of your way.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Scott, so basic format is you'll have 20, 25 minutes with questions.
Okay.
We can take those as you go, or you can have us hold them till the end. Any preference on that?
I'm probably fine with as we go, or just kind of whenever.
Okay.
It's perfectly fine.
That sounds great. The floor is yours.
All right. So I'm Scott Hutchings, and I've built a really fun web application called Story Branches. It's kind of an application meant for prospective writers or anybody else who just kind of wants to fiddle around with kind of writing here and there, whether it's stories or even nonfiction itself. I kind of have this little catchphrase, kind of, choose your own branch stories, kind of playing off the idea of choose your own adventure. And so it's really been kind of fun to build this. Basically, what I've found with stories and wanting to write stories is just it's kind of hard sometimes. I know I have tons of ideas on real cool stories that I think would be awesome. Maybe even movie worthy one day. But for some reason, I never am able to really finish them. A lot of times, I just don't have the time to write it. Like I'll have the cool idea, and then maybe I'll sit down and write a paragraph, and then I realize, oh wait, this is going to take me a long time, and then I never finish it. Other reasons why I don't finish stories is a lot of times is just kind of you run into writer's block, or maybe you're not even sure if it's a good idea. You kind of need some extra feedback from other people to see, oh yeah, that is a good idea. You should write it. Other things, you just kind of are unsure of how the process is. If you need to go through some, legal hoops or other stuff like that, you're just not really sure. And so a lot of times you end up with unfinished or incomplete story ideas. Another thing that I've noticed is pretty much most every story is written by one person. A single perspective. A lot of times, they probably have had some advice from peers, family, and friends, but usually the one author is the only one writing the story. That may be a problem, and it may not be, and that's kind of what I'm trying to kind of play around with this application. And then another thing, kind of along those same lines, is most stories are linear. Just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and that's great. But what if there was a little bit more, non-linearity, I guess. And so that's kind of some of the problems that I tried to solve, I guess. And the main one being just kind of incomplete stories. And so here, with this solution, it's kind of a web application, a platform to where you can put your story ideas down, as well as continue to develop them over time, and kind of go from there. And then with this platform, you're then able to collaborate your stories. So the idea of a single perspective can now be kind of thrown out the window if you want. You can ask your friends, your coworkers, family, anybody to help write your story with you. And so that's where kind of the idea of two heads are better than one can now come into creative writing, to where you can get together, collaborate, and create something that you yourself wouldn't have been able to do. So that's just kind of a cool idea. And along with that, you will get concurrent feedback from those who are helping you write. They'll say, oh, this is a great idea. Let's continue writing it. Or they'll give you a little bit extra twist on your idea that you never thought of before. Along with that, you also get the time of everybody else. So you yourself may only have an hour a day or even less to write a story, but your friends, they might also have an hour or two a day, and together you can complete the story. And that's kind of where that came in. And then the ability to branch stories. The kind of what if the main character did that instead of this? Then you can kind of see, what would happen. You kind of create your own or choose your own branch stories along the way, and it's something that you can either do seriously or just for fun, just to kind of see what would happen if this old fairy tale was a little bit different with all these different decisions that the main character would choose. And so I built this on Ruby on Rails. It's a really fun, developer-friendly framework. It's really helpful for, if you needed to change the data model, you just went in and changed the database, and I didn't have to worry about anything else. Rails is very powerful with that, and I really like it. And so that was fun. Got Postgres on the back to store the data, Bootstrap and jQuery on the front end to make it look a little bit nicer. And right now I'm hosting it on Heroku. It's very simple with Rails. Kind of has its own little easy way to deploy on Heroku, but I'm looking to host it on an actual website real soon. Maybe a different hosting service, but we'll see. So those are the technologies I use. And now we can get to the fun part. So anybody is welcome to go to this website now. I'm actually wanting to get a lot more people to try it out. Beta testers, alpha testers, whatever you want to call it. It's story-branches.herokuapp.com. Hopefully I'll get a newer place soon. There we go. Zoom in a little bit. So here is the welcome page, the landing page. Is kind of a quick little intro as to what we've got, what you can do. We can search posted works. That's kind of a library of works that we already have out there, as well as just kind of some of the steps. Login buttons. I've been able to make it where you can sign in through Facebook and Google, or you can just create your own account. Down at the bottom, an about page just kind of shows a little bit about me, about this idea, where I came up with it. And then the news page. This is just kind of my way of saying, okay, this is what's new in this application. New version rollouts, bug fixes. And then if you run into anything, any bugs, or you have a really cool feature idea, you can come to the contact page and you can shoot me an email, or and I can do what I want, because this is just one of those things that I hope will evolve, just kind of by what everybody wants, because this is there's something new. I don't think very many people have kind of done something like this before, and so I want to see what people want to do with being able to write, especially collaboratively. So once we log in, I'm actually already logged in with Google. It'll kind of take you to like your page. You got some what are called works, or works of fiction, works of nonfiction, however you want to call it, that you are currently working on. And you can kind of see some statistics on those works, how many people this work is shared with, how many branches are in this work, how many contributions, and how many comments or discussions has been going on. So you can kind of see just at a quick glance what's going on with these works. Let's go through and create a new work of fiction, so we can kind of see how that process goes. You clicked on that new work button. You can give it a title. Let's say that we're going to try and do the kind of story of Goldilocks, but maybe a different version, right? If I can spell it right. Say Goldilocks 2, right? This is the real story. What might have happened, if I can spell correctly. And there's different types of works. This could be either a novel, short story, novella, even an essay. I want to try and keep this as generic as possible. So even, this could be used for research. You can have collaboration for a research paper or whatnot. So here, this is kind of the title page, or the kind of a table of contents page. I'm hoping just kind of where you can see what's going on. The summary. We can add a genre over here off to the side. We can add as many genres as we want, but in this case, it's a fairy tale. And if we wanted to, we could even add, it's a science fiction fairy tale. Something that's just never really been thought of before. I just want to make this as open up to your creative minds as possible. And so, and then the cool thing about this is the collaboration. You can share this work with others. And I'm actually going to share this right now with my wife, who is in the audience, and that way we can show kind of real time kind of how this works, kind of the collaboration itself, and it's really kind of fun. As you can see, there's different roles or different permissions that you can give to each person. I might add some more, I might remove some, depends on what makes sense and what works. So now you can see, there are 2 users on this work, and let's start writing. So there's the edit the work button, and now it's empty, of course, because we haven't really written anything. And you try and think like, okay, what, how to start, how should we start this? So come over off to the right side, we got a little discussion board. So I can say, how do you think we should start? And you saw that was kind of an Ajax call. And you could just kind of see real simply, some little notes here and there, as well as almost kind of like a chat, I guess. And you see it just like that, my wife responded and said, all right, maybe we should start with, the classic Once Upon a Time. So let's do that. Once upon a time. You know what, let's make it italic, just for the heck of it. And there we go, we've already added some content. And you can see that, I just want to try and make this as simple as possible. There's definitely a lot left to work on and edit and fix. Maybe make it a little bit cleaner, maybe even make it a little bit more like Google Docs, where the whole thing is kind of editable. But definitely there's a lot that we can do here.
Could she just as easily have written the Once Upon a Time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she could, and right now you can see right there, I didn't even touch the computer, and that was what my wife put in. So Goldilocks was walking through the forest when she saw a little cottage. So let's say, let's try and make this a sci-fi, right? And then I can actually come in and edit, or not. So there's still a few bugs, I guess, but I would be able to go in and edit the person's work, go in and check out and see like, okay, now let's make it, instead of walking through a forest, walking through a space station or something like that. You could just kind of see how together you can come up with more ideas than you wouldn't have really thought of before.
So does last edit win? Last person to edit a particular segment wins?
Yeah, right now it does. I have played around and researched on kind of a version control system, and also different ideas with kind of the owner might make it where, you cannot edit other people's contributions unless you have edit privileges kind of thing. Or, there's a whole bunch of different ideas that it makes it kind of hard to try and nail them all with this. But yeah, right now it's last edit wins, and we can kind of refresh this. It might work now. Yeah, so you can edit, so you can say instead of the forest, it's the space station. When she found a little, I don't know, she found an alien. There you go. Or an alien hut. That's not in the space station, right? But you see what I'm saying? Like, and just like that, we can, make edits and continue building this story together. And then the cool thing about this is we can add branches. So then maybe let's say now is kind of a decision point, right? What is she going to do with this alien? So we can create a new branch. Let's say the first one is, she says to the alien, take me to your leader. Just something kind of random. And that all of a sudden now creates the ability that you can go into a different branch. And so like we can create another branch, like maybe she just runs away. And just like that, we have two different branches off of this story, the same decision point. And you can go into either one and continue writing. And you can see up here in the top is kind of a breadcrumb, at least right now. I am playing around with the idea of a little bit more visual navigation system within your story. But you can go back to chapter 1 if you need to, and any other chapters up the chain.
Are all the decisions in the tree format then?
Yeah, right now they're all in the tree format. I am hoping to make it more of a graph format, so then you could bring two branches back together to the same ending, for instance, if needed. But right now they are in the tree format. And so then we can keep going. Just take me to your leader. The alien says no. And then once you're kind of, once you think that this is an ending branch, then you just click to make this branch an ending. And that becomes kind of an end of that chapter, an end of that branch. Now if we go back to chapter 1, you can kind of see right here that this branch is now complete versus the incomplete one. And let me just finish this one real quick so we can kind of see what else we can do. All right, and so once you see that they're both complete, that this story is now kind of in a complete state, so we can come back to the title page itself, and we can post this work, meaning we can now say, all right, this work is now in kind of a posted state, or it's in a finished state for people to start reading in this application's library. And we can see those right over here in this posted works page. As you can see, I've played around with this idea twice. But you can see the different works that are posted, and you can, refine the searches by, genre or, the type of work itself. You can search. Right now, the search is just by the title, but soon it'll search more by, the summary and other information, maybe even by the authors. But that, and that's just kind of the main idea. And here, this is kind of a similar look to read it, but there's no edit capability. Can't add anything, of course, because this work is finished. This work is posted. And you can kind of see like that. And so basically, that's kind of what I've got. It's really been kind of fun to build this application. There's been a lot of little stuff that I never really noticed. A lot of fun things as well. Are there any quick questions on maybe like the layout or anything that we just saw right here real quick before I go to presentation again?
So when you branch, do you complete the chapter? Do you complete the whole work? Or where does that branch actually end?
Yeah.
Can you create a branch and then have different chapters, or is it just within?
Yeah, you can have different chapters within a branch. Well, basically, like the structure I have is the branch can kind of be a chapter itself. So if you want to keep it a linear story, you just only add one branch, and that's kind of how you go on to the next chapter. When you create a branch, that finishes the ability to continue writing in that branch itself, because at least to me, it doesn't make much sense, like if you, in the middle of something, you're doing the decision, but then you keep going.
Yeah.
That would kind of break the idea of the branching or the decision part itself. Does that answer the question?
Just on the overall structure in that, who did you collaborate with to, figure this, what might be nice or what would be important aspects of this?
Most of it is just me. I just kind of put together what I thought would work. And that's actually been a little bit more difficult than I expected. Even though at my job, I pretty much do some web development, but there I usually have someone tell me, okay, this is what it should look like, or this is how it should work. But here I kind of am my own boss, I guess. And so it's a little bit more difficult to figure out what to do, how it should look. I did have some people look at it. I don't have enough to really get a feel for what everybody likes or what they don't like. But I did have a creative writing teacher that I talked to. He's been a real good help with just kind of figuring out a little bit more from the writer's perspective, as well as just kind of the developer and whatnot. But kind of the general overall look and feel, I just kind of took from other ideas, maybe from Google itself, with kind of a sidebar itself, or just kind of what I thought would work, I guess. All right. And so I have, like I said, this is just a work in progress. I've got a lot left to work on. But in the immediate future, I want to host this on an actual domain. Unfortunately, storybranches.com is taken, but it might go to something like writingstorybranches.com. I'm going to add a whole lot more features. I want to put in version control, so if someone makes a change or deletes everything that you wrote, we can roll back to an older version. As well as feedback for posted work, so when you read it, you can say, oh, that's a good story, or kind of a thumbs up approach. So you can have like so many likes on your story, and that'll rank you higher in the search and whatnot. As well as creative writing exercises. This kind of was a cool idea. There's actually quite a few that I didn't really know about. And it'd be a lot of fun to kind of incorporate this to help people just kind of get their creative juices flowing. Even if it's just as simple as, a prompt of the day kind of thing. And then, of course, just refining the app, refining how it looks, what layout changes I need to make, just kind of the little stuff. Here's some fun lessons that I learned, mainly the Rails framework. I did use it before in web development class a while ago, but I didn't really understand it then. And so kind of diving straight into this was a lot of fun. Kind of along with that, though, was building off of an existing project. This was my initial idea. Somebody else built a project called Authors Unfettered, I think a year, maybe 2 years ago. His name was, I think, Lane Sawyer for his web development class. Unfortunately, I was unable to actually make it work on my computer the same way that he had it working on his. There was probably something wrong with, versions of the different gems or the different packages that I needed. So that was kind of frustrating at the beginning, but I think overall it was a good idea to scrap that and start fresh, because now I know how everything works. I know how the Rails framework kind of controls everything in the domain itself. So that was kind of fun. Another thing I noticed was just the minutia of building a website, especially by yourself. There's just a lot of little things. Okay, should it be this color green or that color green? Should it be this wide or that smaller, or should I not even have that column? All these little things that are kind of not even really important, but together it builds the website. And so that was kind of, something I never really thought would take as much time as it did. And then, purchasing a domain and hosting it, I thought it'd be a little bit easier. It's not, especially if the domain you want is gone. And then researching decisions was actually kind of fun. There was some of the bigger stuff that I needed to work on, like what was the main core of this system I wanted to do. I set aside some time with a few focus groups with some friends, coworkers. Just kind of gave them a piece of paper of a story and said, hey, here you are, let's say I share this story with you. How would you go about adding to the story or contributing to the story? And just seeing what they wanted to do on paper helped me figure out that a lot of times people might wanted to do a little bit more branching, or they might just want to do a quick little grammar edit here and there. So that was kind of fun to see that the direction should go a little bit more that way than this way is what I initially thought. As well as researching how to use version control. I took a look at the GitHub API, and that's actually kind of cool. I only thought Git was meant for source code, but you can actually use content as well. And so, yeah, that was kind of some lessons I learned. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
So where do you go from here?
Oh,
How do you?
yeah. I plan on continually working on this. Just putting in a couple hours each week to continually building on this application. I never really saw this as kind of a semester-long project. I see this as something I want to keep doing, keep building, because I can see this being something fun. Even if it's not something that serious writers go into, I can see this as something like on Facebook, people are like, hey, I'm writing this fun story. Let's, write this together with me, just for the heck of it. Or for people who, run into that writer's block, they might just need an extra kick from some friends, with their different ideas. So it was just more of an idea of, I just want to continue building this. I want to see if I can even get some revenue out of this, maybe through advertising, or maybe a way to actually print these these books that people create, and I'll just get a little bit overhead with the cost and stuff. So that's kind of what I imagine myself in the future doing with this.
Where do you go next to validate the idea or see if it's really working? This creative writing teacher that you have you explored the idea of sitting down a group of students even for a class period or something like that?
Yeah,
what do you think?
My creative writing teacher actually was the one who suggested that. He, when I shared this with him, he said, "This is looking good," and then he said, "I wonder what would happen if if we got just a group of students to sit down and work on this for 1 hour." And that is exactly what I need. That is exactly what I need to see what works, what doesn't, what the people want. They wish they had a button here, or they wish that everything was editable, stuff like that. I just don't have that user feedback yet. And so it's hard to tell exactly where to go in the code. But yeah, that's exactly what my creative writing teacher wants to do. I'm probably gonna real soon maybe even post a link on Facebook and see who wants to try and join. I've already invited a couple other people to try it out. But yeah, that's the next step, is just actual user testing to see what works and what doesn't.
My feedback would be a small group, in-person group would probably be best to start out with, and then as you continue to refine, I'd probably personally even go to Facebook, and after that, there's several sites out there for posting your stories and even writing your stories online. You might be able to tap into their forums and have them, some of the writers that do this somewhat frequently.
That's true.
Come over to your site and test it out after you refine it. So,
yeah,
that's good. Other questions? All right, great job, Scott. Thanks. Thanks. All right, so next up we'll have Brooke and Anthony. We have about 4 or 5 minutes before start. So we'll break.
Before all breaks. Yeah, what did you use for your iPhone?
It's not what I want it to be. I want it to be kind of more WebSockets. But right now it's just doing a jQuery call every 6 seconds to see if something new came up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I love the crowd interaction on that one too, huh?
Yeah,
No
that's great.
on it. This is
Yeah. Do you want the person not talking to just stand here and plug it in?
Just not me. I'm so God.
Yes, this is being archived for posterity soon.
how good.
Posterity.
I can go make my children watch it when I'm old.
That's right.
Is that what a laptop looks like? Wow.
The screen to watch something.
Yeah. Watch what? Oh yeah.
I watched it in January. It's October.
Yeah, you have to watch it in October.
Good time. We got a long way. But some of the stuff, I'm like, we're totally there. Yeah, totally there.
Not like they're on the flying cars yet.
Yeah, the boards.
Working hard on the hoverboard, it sounds like.
Self-tying shoes.
Or there's some fake ones that are
Nike
Nike
self-tying.
might be close. Yeah, clothing styles like this big. Clothing styles are kind of crazy, but not quite as extreme as the movie.
clothing itself is going out of fashion.
Yeah.
All right, I say we're close enough. If you guys are anxious to,
Yeah, let's
we'll
just-
let other people join us when they come.
Sweet. All right. So we are the project Math Fundamentals. Brooke and I have been working on this for the semester. So a little bit of background about this project. My dad has been a math teacher for about 30 years now. And you constantly hear whether when you're taking classes that math is like one of the hardest subjects to learn, right? So you're like, oh, I hate math. I can do other things, but I hate math. So my dad, who has been working with math students, especially math students who struggle in high school with math, has been working with them, and he's come across various ways that he can help these students out, and he's found that these principles and these lessons that he's learned can apply to really anybody who's learning math or who already knows math, and it can really help them understand these fundamental rules and principles of math that will help them in any topic, any upper level math or just basic math as well. So that's a little bit of background.
The problem here, you always learn about the tricks, the rules, the shortcuts, and it seems like math is made up of rules and shortcuts, and you're learning how to get around your math rather than actually learning how to do math. Like, oh, remember this acronym FOIL so that you can know how to do this certain thing in math. And it doesn't seem like you're actually learning math. You're just learning how to do tricks. Also, when did you first learn how to do addition? You learned probably in first grade. When did you learn how to add decimals? That was probably a little bit later, maybe third or fourth grade. Fractions or variables was probably in junior high. It seems like you're learning addition throughout all of your math classes over and over again. Why don't you just learn math once? So the idea with this new way of teaching math is to teach addition once, teach multiplication once, teach division once, teach all of these things only once, but then that spreads across all types of math problems that you only have to learn those basic principles once. So now we're going to show a little bit how that works.
Are y'all ready to learn some math?
Yeah.
We're going to go over the addition lesson, and this is kind of going to be the format of how our lessons are going to, or how the lessons are laid out, is essentially we're going to teach some basic principles. We're not even going to focus on the actual addition part of things until later on. We want to teach this fundamental rule that is true across anything, and then go from there. So, what do you get when you add one elephant to one elephant? You have two elephants now. But what happens if you try to add one elephant to one tiger? You don't get two elephant tigers or an elephant-liger or something like that. You still only have one elephant and one tiger.
So glad to use tiger instead of rhino.
There's a missed joke right there, dang it. So the fundamental rule of addition is when you add things together, they must have the same name. So once again, if we go back to the elephant tiger, if we have one elephant, the name is elephant. And if we have another elephant, the name is elephant. And so we can add those things together. Same with the tiger. But if they're different names, elephant or tiger, we cannot add them together. So now, let's check that understanding. We want to make sure that the students understand this concept. So, can you add one elephant to one lion? And if they say yes, well, of course, you can't do that. And we have error messages that pop up and try and remind them. And also, we allow students to go back and look at the concepts again if they want to make sure that they, this is what we're talking about. So we say, no, you can't add an elephant to a lion. We continue. Well, can you add one lion to one lion? Yes, because the names are the same. And can you add two tigers to one tiger? Yes, because the names are the same. And then finally, can you add that many tigers to this many triggers? And once again, we're not focusing on the number, we're just focusing on the name. And even though the names are similar, they're not the same, so no, you cannot add them. So now, that's the basic idea of math. That's first grade math. But we also want to teach the students that this rule applies no matter what we're talking about. And so we want to continue on this concept with things that may look more advanced, things that you may have learned in maybe 5th or 6th grade, but we want to teach 1st graders this stuff. So for example, if you see some random thing like to lark, all you need to know is that lark is the name. Or if you see 8xy, you just need to know that xy is the name. You don't care about the number, you just care about the name. So as long as they have the same names, you can add them together. So for example, if you have 2x and 3x, the name is x, the name is the same, so you can add them together. Or if you have 3z, can you add 3z to 2zx? Well, no, the names are different, so you can't add them together. And can you add 3abcde to 4abcde? Yes, the names are the same. And so that is basically the fundamental lesson of addition. You know, we could even add in exponents and things like that. It doesn't really matter. It's just we're focusing on the one rule of addition, which is if the name is the same, you can add them together.
So here's just a quick overview of how our app is laid out. Most apps, you have probably a pretty big server, and it serves up content to your client, and it's a one-way communication. In our system, we have a two-way communication with our server and our client. We use Node.js and Sails as our framework, and AngularJS in the front end. It also allows your server to be a lot more efficient, so you can use, it takes a lot less memory and it's easier to scale up. We had a lot of goals when we first started this web app. Our number one goal is to learn new things. So all of our technologies that we chose, we had little or no experience with so that we can learn about them and learn how to actually apply the skill of learning things, because you know you're going to always have new technologies that you need to learn. Second thing was that we wanted to be secure, so we wanted to make sure that you can't see another student's data or something weird like that. We also wanted a responsive web, good user experience. We want it to be fast, and we want our code base to be maintainable and reusable, and we wanted an efficient development process, so we tried to focus on that. So once again, our top goal was to learn new things. So we chose AngularJS, Node.js, Sails.js, and Postgres, which we haven't used before. And we learned a lot going through all of these things so that we could learn how to learn and to be able to apply these new things in the workplace.
Thank you. So as Brooke mentioned, we spent a lot of time, first of all, using new technologies we'd never used before. And second of all, we spent a lot of time trying to do things the right way. And so one of the things that we really focused on, first of all, was security. With a normal server setup, security is usually handled by a session on the server and a cookie on the client, right? So every time the user makes a request to the server, it sends the cookie data to the server, and the server checks that cookie data and says, okay, this is where that person is, and things like that, remembers things. What we ended up doing was, because we wanted a stateless server or RESTful API backend server, is we used JSON Web Tokens. It's a little bit different paradigm, and how it works is that when a student logs in or a teacher logs in, you get a payload, for example, the student ID, and then you hash that, and you return both the unhashed and the hash portion of that, and that's part of as a JSON object. And when it goes to the students, or it goes to the client side, then the client is able to check that unhashed portion and use that. So for example, student ID of 1, you can use that in your app, you know, do things with it. But then on every request to the server, whether it's for new information or things like that, in AngularJS, we intercept each request and add that web token back into the header. And the server validates that token, you know, rehashing that payload to make sure. What that allows us to do is, say, for example, if the student ID of 1 makes a request to get student ID of 2's information, first of all, we'll check to make sure that that's a valid token, but then we can also do authentication and say, well, this student ID of 1 shouldn't access student ID of 2's information. We can reject that request. So we spent a lot of time on JSON Web Tokens, getting it up and running, something we'd never really even heard of before this project. But as mentioned before, what it really allows us to do is allows us to use a platform as a service like Heroku to really add servers, and using their built-in load balancing tool, all users can be routed to completely new servers, and it doesn't matter, you know, they don't have sessions stored on the server, and so any server can handle any request from any user. So we can easily scale up to if there's a huge load, or scale down when it's like nighttime or things like that. So.
Our other goal was to have a responsive website. So we used Bootstrap to make sure that our website was responsive, but we also wanted to use a RESTful API on the other side, so that if we ever decide to make a native app or anything, all we need to do is hit that API rather than having our server and our client so connected. We also wanted a good user experience. We use what's called Browser Sync. It lets you pull up your website on other devices while you're developing. So you have it on mobile, you have it on tablet, and you can make sure everything looks good and it actually moves along with you while you're testing it out. We also used, as you saw in our demo, some error factory and message factory and message directives, so that we can give good feedback to the user so that they know, oh, this was a good thing, this was a bad thing, and they're not confused. We also, AngularJS doesn't really handle page refreshes very well. If you refresh, you might lose like your user. So we had to use session storage to make sure that we keep the user in a session, and that's how we did that. We also wanted to make sure that our web was fast and light, so that if you're on mobile or anything else, or on a poor connection, it will still work really well. So we used UI Router, which lets us have a single page application. You're not making as many requests to the server. All your HTML is on the client and everything renders on the client. It makes it a lot faster. And we made sure we minified all our JavaScript and CSS so that those requests are a lot smaller when they are retrieved. Having our server be a Node RESTful API let us be more efficient, and you can use less server and get more out of it, which is really, really nice. So most of the rendering is on the client, and that saves a lot on the server side.
All right. One of the other things that we really focused on was trying to make sure that this project, as we built it, would be easy to maintain and easy to upgrade in the future. And one of the things that we spent another long, couple of weeks on was getting our unit testing up and running. And this is what it kind of looks like right now. When we run our unit tests, it goes through and it says, okay, for example, the create teacher controller should create a teacher by posting to the server. So it runs that test and checks to see if it passes the test. And if it doesn't, then it fails, and it gives us an error message where we can then go in and look and find out why it failed and go fix that code. So one of the great things about unit testing that we really love about it is, for example, last week I rewrote one of the core systems in our AngularJS app, and then all I had to do to make sure that it still worked after being rewritten was just run all of our unit tests, and if it passes all of them, then we were good to go. It didn't cause any problems in our system. So we have right now about 25-ish unit tests, and that we actually need to write a couple more as well. So we'll end up probably pretty soon with around 35 or so, and that's just with the code that we have right now. And the goal is to, every time we write a new function or a new controller, to have a unit test for that as well, so that we're making sure that it's always tested and always maintainable. So here's kind of just an overview of what a unit test looked like. We wrote it in Karma Jasmine, and you essentially just, and this is what each unit test looks like. So all 24 tests kind of look similar to this. So it was a lot of code, but we really wanted to focus on it. But essentially, before each test, you go and set up and make sure that it's a clean test. And then you go in and you actually test it by comparing, you expect thing A to equal thing B. And then afterwards, you go and clean up and make sure that there wasn't any extra server calls that you didn't expect or things like that. And so it's great because you can see, oh, we're actually making 3 server calls when we were only expecting 2, and so let's go and figure out why that's happening, things like that. So it was a really good and useful experience. And finally, we'll just go quickly over some of the build process. And once again, something new that we hadn't used before, but we really liked is our grunt tasks. So what grunt does is we've set it up so that every time we save any file in our project, it runs all of these tasks and builds essentially our system over again. So we clean out all of our public files, our HTML files, our CSS and JavaScript files, and then we copy over the new ones into that public folder so that we don't have to worry about caching issues and things like that. Our browser seeing old code. We also are using less to write our CSS, and so we customize the Bootstrap theme in less, and then it all compiles down into one CSS file. All of our JavaScript files are actually individual files, so we have one file per page JavaScript file, and it allows us to really see, okay, this JavaScript file belongs to this HTML, so we can, if something's broken, we can go in and find it. But we don't want that to happen when we actually deploy the code, so we concatenate all those different files into one monolithic JavaScript file. And then we lint it because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. And that just makes sure that we're not missing any semicolons, that our syntax is correct and things like that. And then in order to minify JavaScript or Angular code, we have to annotate it, and it's just something unique to Angular that you have to with its dependency injection, you just have to make sure you do it the right way. So we annotate it as well. And then we minify it. So it takes out all the spacing comments of our JavaScript files, even renames our variables to be short, little one-letter things. And right now, even though our app is pretty small, it already takes off about 12 kilobytes. And as we go bigger, that'll be even more data that we can save. So yeah, that's essentially all the tech stuff. We'll go to Brooks for finally another little demo of our project, and we'll finish up.
Okay, so the teacher can go to the teacher logins in order to sign in. Here they can see all their various classes, and they can also add classes here. You just enter in a name and a description. Then they can also view their classes. So here's my Math 404. And they can also edit it if they maybe didn't spell anything right. There's a class add code that lets them they give this code to students so that they can add a class. It makes it much easier because then a teacher doesn't have to go through and add students individually to their class. They can have the students add their class to themselves. In this code, we made it so that it didn't do weird things like put zeros and O's together, because those are always really confusing. And it's actually not a true hash. It's so it makes it easier to figure out how to put students in classrooms together, but it also makes it so that student can't guess something to get in someone's classroom. This teacher can also see a list of their students in a sortable table. They can quickly look through their table and see who's in their class. And for each student, they can see a profile and a grade, so that they can see who's doing well, what their academic standing is, things like that. That's basically the teacher view. The student sees the classes that they're in, and they can add a class here. So let's see. Here's my code. And then they're added to class, and they can start the lessons from here. So that's basically our app so far.
That's pretty much it. We have plans. I at least have plans of continuing to work on this since it's kind of my father's pet project, and so there's still a lot of work to be done, but we like what we have. So, do you have any questions?
So, give me a little bit more detail on where do you see the system going from here? How much work needs to be done in order to get a minimum viable product so that you can actually test it out? And then after you answer that, I'll ask you the question after.
Okay. There's what we really want to do is my dad has a lot of the lessons already laid out, and so the next thing I want to do is we have a basic lesson in, but we want to set up the system so that he can an administrator can go in and add lessons and things like that. The idea of the system isn't really like a learning suite type thing where the teachers create their own lessons. He wants it to be something that he controls because, he just wants to focus simply on the fundamentals. So we have to I want to build that out and, kind of clean things up, things that still don't look as nice or, things like that. So it's still a lot actually to do, but it's something I will keep on working on, so.
Then how does doing this project help each of you in your career?
So I can actually answer this. We started doing Node.js at work, and it was really nice to be able to go between both things and see the different aspects of what worked here or what worked here. And I could bring those ideas that I learned to work and be like, well, I learned how to do this. I learned how to do unit testing. Do you want me to start doing unit testing? And that was really nice. Just a lot of that, and being able to start new technologies. Because the technologies that I did use at work were not ones that people had ever really heard of, and now all of a sudden we're doing things that they have heard of, and I'm like, well, I can actually learn things in multiple places and be able to contribute in both. So.
Yeah, and for me, I've been a very traditional web developer in the past. Just mainly a giant server that feeds off compiled HTML, and I wanted to be able to round my skills out and use a single page application framework like AngularJS to because that's where the industry is moving right now, is definitely toward more single page application type setups. And so I wanted to be able to at least have a lot of good experience with that, and I think it's really helped me a lot as well. So
Have you, out of curiosity, have you allowed any 5, 6, 7-year-olds to get their hands on it?
Not on our webpage, but my dad has done a lot of stuff with his grandchildren on the lessons that he has built.
Okay.
And so as far as that goes, yes, he has done a lot. We haven't.
So the lessons, but not necessarily the system.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Good.
So the age group, what age group are you targeting?
This is mainly, we want to target pretty much anyone who wants to learn math an easier way. And so, the ideal group would be to get into the younger demographic and teach them from the beginning, this is a fundamental rule of addition. But at the same time, we kind of want to open this up to be so that anyone, if you have a homeschooled child or if you yourself want to get on and learn math, just open it up to you and you can get on as well. So
have you thought about using more visual things like a picture of a tiger and a picture of a lion and an elephant?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
More interesting for them?
Yeah, we're definitely going to integrate that as well.
We actually talked about that, and we don't have time. So.
Yeah.
So the lessons and the techniques are obviously from your father.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking ahead to opening this up to, say, university, say, high school, other teachers, are they going to be able to do their own lessons, or is this lessons that your father puts in there and then they have to build a class around that? Do you know how that's going to work yet?
We really want to, just for the moment, limit it mainly in scope to just the lessons that my father has. This is a math program, essentially. We don't want to make it into a learning suite type thing or anything like that. And so, we want to allow students to just go in and be like, okay, it's time for math, and this is what they use. So, good.
What was your favorite part about working on the project?
What's your favorite part?
I thought the front end part was my favorite with the Angular because I thought I knew that stuff, but then I didn't know how much I didn't know until I actually worked on it. So that was really nice, being able to do the whole full stack, because there's a lot of times where you get hired into a job that you're not doing the full stack, but I think it's important to know the full stack so you know what's going on at each layer.
Nice.
That was my favorite part.
Yeah, similar. I just enjoy learning. And so every time I ran into a problem, just sitting down for a couple hours and bashing my head against it. So, the JSON web token took a couple of weeks, but that was fun. in the end. And unit testing, I actually ended up enjoying and things like that. So, you know, I'm kind of weird like that. So,
Plenty of jobs out there for you.
all right. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks so much.
There you go, guys. Well done. Tomorrow at 10:30. It's going to be. So, is watching online also count as coming to? I've already watched well, I've watched Brock and Grandson.
Well, don't hesitate to,
I guess I wasn't during it. I wasn't there. We can ask questions on it. Ask stories.
Was everyone like
relationship.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, it is.
I can't complain. Are you gonna
Get out of here.
well? Conan's gonna have a lot to say.